Welcome everybody. People are joining our final campfire talk of the season, so come on in, cozy up next to the campfire. We're going to get started in a moment, but as you come in, please introduce yourself. Participants, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're calling in from, and what your camp is. So, and we'll just get started in a moment. Just let people come in. Looking forward to seeing all of your comments in the chat. Let us know where you're from. What your camp is. I'm Peta. I'm going to be your host today. Again, this is our final campfire talk of the season. This is our 4th season of campfire talks, and all of these are recorded. So we have so much great content. As you're coming in, yep, good to see y'all. We have a website that has all of the previous campfire talks up, all the recordings up. So here's another great one that we're going to be adding, but we have 4 years of great content. So be sure to check that out. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here. It's good to see all of you today. And like I said, my name is Peta. I'm a member of the Camp Network team, and we are the group that puts on Campfire Talks. And so I don't know if the Campfire team members just want to raise your hands and give a little wave to say who you are. But yeah, it's good to have everybody here. Today we're talking about acculturation and accountability within the Burning Man community. And you know, a lot of times this extends outside the Burning Man community, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the Burning Man community today. And as we gear up for yet another journey out to the playa, it's essential to reflect on how we embrace the 10 principles and hold ourselves accountable to them. And again, if you're just joining, please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, the name of your camp, and where you are calling in from today. Also, you might want to put in the chat what you're interested to learn today. That can help us guide our conversation that we have today. So that might be something you can also include in the chat. And as we get started, just a reminder of some of our meeting guidelines. Your mic is going to be muted, but please feel free to utilize the chat. Put your questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A time at the end of our campfire talk today where your questions will be asked. And then just be respectful in your participation, be present, and speak from your own experience. We really value your feedback, so there'll be a feedback form that comes in the chat, and we just appreciate if you can fill that out before you head out at the end of the campfire talk. So let's go ahead and meet our panelists for today. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Abigail. And is Abigail going to come in the spotlight?
Sorry, I didn't know if you were going to like give the introduction that Jamie had me submit.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and read it. Yeah. So Abigail is a former Burners Without Border chapter co-lead and a current Burners Without Border BRC camper. Burners Without Borders camp has 111 campers. Abigail is a former regional board member and performer at Oregon Country Fair, and she has a professional experience in medicine, music, event production, real estate, and design with a current focus as a real estate investor and designer. Her passions include affordable housing and food access. Welcome, Abigail. AJ is our next panelist to introduce. He is an educator, coach, and project manager in Denver, Colorado. His first burn was in 2013, and he was camp lead by 2015. He's camped with Kashik through his entire burn career, and Kashik has 75 campers. Like most TCOs, he wears many leadership hats, but his major focus for the past 3 years has been new member onboarding, which is a really helpful thing for us to learn more about. He's published a pretty extensive first timers guide that has been adopted by several other camps. And I know that that link to that first timers guide will be in the chat. So look out for that. So welcome, AJ. And then our next panelist is Bobalicious. Bobalicious is the Burning Man regional contact for Denver, Colorado, and has been burning brightly with Astral Headwash since 1998. Astral Headwash has 20 to 30 campers. And I just have to say, I'm kind of amazed because you guys do so much. I can't believe there's only 20 to 30 people in your camp. But you really get people to participate. So I think that's what makes it work. Starting the camp after his roommate returned in 1997 saying that Burning Man is a community event more than sex, drugs, and boom boom festival. Oh, don't tell anybody else that. And his roommate would only return if she could give back to the community in the form of a theme camp and if she could figure out how to wash her hair on playa. 22 Burning Mans later, he still loves giving back and washing heads. So welcome to Bobalicious. Thanks for being here. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with a poll. So we'd like you to participate, the participants, with a poll. So the poll is coming up right here. How did you first come to Burning Man? With other first-time burners, with friends who'd been here before, solo, or you actually haven't been to Burning Man and you're just here because you want to learn more. So please fill out the poll. Is that coming up for people? Yeah, okay. I am not seeing any answers, but maybe I will once it closes. I'm not sure. So someone's going to have to, oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so here are our responses. 43% first came to Burning Man with friends who'd been before. 26% came with other burners or arrived solo, so both at 26%. And 4% have never been to Burning Man. So thanks. Thanks for that. Kind of interesting. So yeah, our friends take us to Burning Man often. So that's a great thing. All right. So let's get introduced to Burning Man. So I want to ask the panelists, how we'd love to know how you came to Burning Man and if you felt prepared for your first year or how you prepared. So any of you can just go ahead and give an answer to that. Who wants to start?
So my first burn was in 2015, and I also wrote a guide for virgins. And the reason I wrote it is because at that time I like read everything I could find on the internet, but also felt that there was no consensus on how to get ready for Burning Man. And I still feel that way. Obviously, like how I want to burn versus how somebody else wants to burn is probably very different. Um, and I found that every way that I prepared was wrong. Um, and I also felt I was a part of a camp, but I felt lost in that camp and I didn't feel supported and I just felt like really lonely. And I actually left my first burn saying I never want to come back to that place. I hate it there. That was awful. But really I was in the wrong camp, in the wrong neighborhood, and had no idea where to put myself. And I didn't know myself well enough to judge that. Um, and so I left like, oh God, that was awful. Never going back. And then I started dreaming of burn and decided to go back because I do pretty much everything that my dreams tell me to do. And I did that and came back and eventually found my way to Burners Without Borders. But that's also probably why I'm welcome lead, why, greeting virgins, new people to camp and whatever is so important to me because I didn't have that. And for me, like I can be pretty introverted and like shy to even like ask to participate. And so I needed somebody to like help give me permission to do that, at least in the beginning, because it was so different from what I was used to experiencing in the default world. So I try to like fill that gap for maybe other people who feel that way in our camp in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Nice. And can you just say, like, what are a few of the things that you feel like you didn't prepare well for when you said that you did it quote unquote wrong? Do you remember what those things were? Or...
Yeah, I think gear wise, I was like
Mm,
prepared enough. Um, but like where do I want to spend my time wise? I had no idea, right? Because at that time there were a lot less resources on the internet, for one. And two, a lot of like what gets talked about is the like big, loud, flashy stuff. And my favorite things are like some of the talks or like the quiet little cute sunrise things and stuff. But I didn't know that. So I kept going to like these like large parties and stuff and being like, I hate this.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and so I like now I know that I like find the camps that have resonant messaging for me and I like look who's going to be speaking and like kind of plan it that way or I follow different artists online. But I didn't know how to do those things or how to access those things or even kind of like what to ask there. So I just felt kind of like lost in going from like one bright thing to another. And I now know like if there's a bright sparkling thing happening on Playa, I'm going the opposite way. Um, because of who I am. And
mhm.
so, but I didn't know that at that time. And I think that's really where I wasn't prepared.
It feels like finding your place. I think we have to find our place and who we are and who we want to be there at Burning Man. And sometimes that can be a little overwhelming and confusing because there are lots of shiny, bright things to chase after. For
Yeah, now I'm like, where are the ones that kind of look like firelight? I know I usually like those things.
nice, nice. How about you, AJ? You want to tell us a little bit about how you first came to Burning Man and if you were prepared?
Sure. In college, I met a couple friends who were tangentially tied to like a pretty big New York City burn crew. And then when I moved to Denver, my neighbors were like randomly a house of burners. So it like felt like these stars were kind of aligning. So in 2013, like both parties were like, we got you, let's go, let's do this. Like I had my ride out there with the Denver crew and my place to stay with the New York crew. So I had like a pretty reasonable pathway to attending in 2023 or 2013 and just kind of took it. As far as preparation, I mean, I think like most first timers, I had a smattering of advice from different folks, and some was really good and some was really bad. Um, I think, I reached out to a couple camp leads that were camp leads at our camp in 2013, and they insist that there was a camp guide back then. I never saw it. I'm dubious of its existence. Um, but I feel like it was mostly word of mouth, right? Like, and word of mouth is really good for some things when it's like, hey, here's the culture of our camp, or here's what you need to expect for our camp. Like, those are really good conversations to have. But like technical things of like, where are you set up? Where's your shade? What are you doing when you get there? What time can you arrive? Like, that was the things that I didn't really flow for me the first year. Like, I showed up later than I should have. I set up my tent directly in the middle of the sun. I didn't even know that shade was publicly available. Just plopped it right in the middle and said, this is good to go. My cooler was not playa ready. But I feel like I made it work. Like that's kind of the flow that year one, you get there and you kind of make do where the reality meets your expectations and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to work with. And then year two, you get to kind of adjust that meeting point a little bit. You adjust your expectations and you can adjust the reality a little bit. So for year one, I was prepared enough, which I think is really the key.
Nice. And I think, when we're thinking about acculturation, we learn from our own experiences, right? So you were saying, Abigail, about, knowing, kind of translating the information or the feelings that you had when you're helping other new campers come in and just using our life experiences a little bit to help set the mood for acculturation. Bobalicious, what about you?
Back in 1998, my internet was Wired magazine, hard copy. So there really was not a whole lot. There were some photos online, maybe. I don't know. My internet access wasn't that great. But fortunately, a roommate went. She had some ideas. We showed up on Wednesday of Burn Week, 14,000 people that year. We drove straight in and camped on A Street. And there was no problems. It was just a whole different animal back then. The one thing that we weren't prepared for was the heat, and we all had our tents. We thought, oh, we'll be fine. No, now we all have shade covers over our tents. So, but showing up on a Wednesday was actually really nice. We just pushed through everything in a short time, and by Sunday we were ready to go home and still alive. So it was all very good. So, but we
Nice.
also in 98 we came, three of us came in a Suburban, and now we have two Burning Man containers and a toy hauler with a full-size truck to pull it all out there. So definitely a lot more is happening now that we are better prepared. So the
Yeah,
containers are a lifesaver, letting us bring our toy hauler and have shade. And it's not for the air conditioning. We actually rarely are in there during the day. We just have a nice, comfortable place to be dust free at night.
nice, nice. That's great. And if you're just joining us, I see we have a couple new participants. Please let us know where you are calling in from, the name of your camp. We're talking with our three panelists, acculturation and accountability. Just getting some ideas about the first experiences of the burn for our panelists. So now we're going to shift and talk about helping new burners and new campers get acculturated. What are some of your best practices and tips that you can share with us? Or if you have if you've had a particularly effective onboarding experience in your life, whether you've done the onboarding or you were onboarded. So yeah, who would like to speak to that, to bringing on new campers?
I
I
can
can
start.
start with that one. Oh,
Go ahead, Bob.
all right. So every year, since I've been a regional, we've thrown the Virgin Barbecue in Denver. And so what we do is we just basically have a potluck barbecue where we bring the community together. We have the virgins, we have the veterans, and we sit down, and basically it's a free for all. Anyone can ask what they want, because everyone's specifics. Like I do half of it where I tell you about the 10 principles, and that it's not a sex, drugs, and boom boom festival. It's a community event. But then really we open it up and let the virgins ask any of the questions that they're dying to ask. And I don't answer. It's other veterans that will come in and step in. So it's a definitely collaboration of people giving answers. And then at the end, we break down to go even further if people have more one-on-one questions, or they're a little introverted and don't like to ask a question in public. Just have that open format so that our virgins in Denver can really feel comfortable making the trek. And we have a lot of standard advice, bring shade, bring water, piss clear, the whole 9 yards. But a lot of people ask about Jungo Road and other things that are just very specific to them, that we give everyone an opportunity to ask a month before the event begins. And as far as Astro Headwash goes, our new people actually get a member of Astro Headwash that acculturates them on a one-on-one basis. It's just not me and Miss Alicious who are talking to all of our new people. But like if John brings in, Jane, then we're like, hey, Jane, if you have any questions, go to John, ask him. If it doesn't, give you the answer that you're looking for, come ask us. But and John, make sure that she's ready. We have our packing list emails that 2 months before the event, all of our camp members every week get an email from us. And every week we highlight a different thing that is important for us to communicate to them, so they're not overwhelmed. Well, they are overwhelmed, but they're overwhelmed with little bits of information over a long period of time rather than a lot of information over a little bit of time.
Mhm. Sounds good. So in person, basically having a sponsor really helps the process.
Yeah.
Abigail or AJ, you want to add?
Yeah, so the what is it? Africa Burn, their 12th principle is each one teach one, or 11th principle. I
Mhm.
forget. Um, and I really believe in that because my first burn, I had no teacher, and our camp culture for virgins was like virgins are a burden. And so I was like scared to even ask how to use the shower. I was like, nope, I don't need to know how to use that. I'll just avoid it and be dirty. And so I've taken on welcome lead at our camp and wrote that guide and stuff. And I'm a huge advocate for the buddy system. We haven't quite adopted it as a camp yet, but I think that there's a lot that Bob was saying of value in there, not only having a buddy system, but making sure that that buddy knows that they are responsible for stewarding that person. Because like uh, I've seen people have like a friend who brought them to Burning Man, and you see their circumstance, and you're like, your friend is an asshole. Uh, and so like having that kind of culture where it's a blessing to get to bring a friend to burn and to get to share that and like the like beauty and that responsibility, I think is a really important part of not just camp culture, but like culture of playa, period.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. AJ, you have anything to add?
Yeah. So kind of, working off some of the things that we already heard, the buddy system I think has merit, but I also think there were a lot of, at our camp, a lot of like, oh, this is my friend. I've been before, I'll bring them. And you're like, fine, great. I don't have to worry about it. And those are usually some of the campers that I think are set up the worst. Like, and it maybe isn't necessarily like malice or like bad intent. They might just be bad at onboarding and communicating the information. So sometimes they're really good at it and sometimes they're not so good at it. So one of the things I insist on is every rookie schedules a one-on-one call, text, phone, like video call with me. As soon as I get their registration that says they want to come, I do that. And it's a little bit to like make contact with them, but more than anything else, it's to get direct lines of communications with this person. Like now they have my phone number. I know their face. I know their number. We know each other's names. And I really want them to ask me questions, right? Like if you want good acculturated burners, like I want them to come to me. It's not a bother. I want to help. I was a teacher for many years and I want them to feel comfortable and stress-free on the way up to the burn. So I want them to text me like, hey, I'm considering this air conditioning unit. Hey, like, is this bike gonna work? Like, hey, is this a good moot plan for me? Like those are where like the good stuff happens for me. Like, I could send out a million camp guides and rookie guides, but if people, I'm just assuming people are reading it, right? Like, or I know for a fact that they aren't reading it. There is no like real confirmation that they are receiving and understanding that information. So I really try and insist on that like one-on-one pathway a little bit. And then my other piece of advice that I really like is try and make the principles or the camp values, whatever they are, feel personal to them. You want to kind of inspire this acculturation, not mandate it. You want to like meet them where they're at a little bit. And a thing that I think about was I had a talk about civic responsibility with two people at our camp, and one was a teacher and one was a city planner, and how like vastly different those definitions of civic responsibility felt. They were both valid, and we just have to create space for both of them to be valid. So the thing, like the tangible aspect of that is like, I don't like to regurgitate the 10 principles in my rookie guide. I don't like to I'll share the survival guide, but I don't want to restate it because that doesn't really give any room for someone to really for the seed to plant and grow, right? People acculturate a lot of different ways, and just reading text is like not really the way for most people that like inspiration takes hold in them. So when I onboard, I'll talk about Burning Man values and I'll talk about camp values, but I also want to leave a lot of room for nuance and conversation, right? We want that idea to it's like more like inception like than persuasion, right? We want it to like take hold in them organically and then being like, oh my God, like the radical self-reliance piece really clicks with me, right? Or like, oh, the way your camp values, what you do with your frontage is a really cool idea and I want to be a part of it, as opposed to like, we mandate that you do one shift up front, right? Like, so that's kind of the angle that I approach it with, is like really leave some room to ground some of the principles or values that you have, let them like take hold on a personal level rather than just like a text level.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder though, when you're saying that you're the contact for the virgin or for the newbies, and you're answering all those questions, does that get a little overwhelming sometimes as the camp lead? Or is there someone else? Do you have a team of people, or are all the questions coming to you as the lead?
Peter, a team sounds lovely. We do not have a team. It is just me. I have a lot of different ways that I do it. I feel like my general flow is in June. It's pretty open, like start with a text and we'll schedule something. And then in July and August, I do office hours. So like there'll be another group chat that is just our rookies. And I'll just do office hours. That's like, hey, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm working from home from noon to 6 is my head down time. You could call me, right? And if you call me outside of that time, that's fine. We could still schedule something. But I originally planned it as like that was a Zoom call that I would just be on, that people would show up to. But the time zones and schedules don't always work. But I have found that it's pretty contained, that most people will like call or text me in that time, especially if during the week I send them little reminders like, hey, this seems like it's going to be a longer conversation. Why don't we hop onto my office hours on Tuesday at 6 or whatever.
I love that. That's a great idea. I actually, we had a campfire talk about leadership last year, and one of the camp leads actually has office hours on playa. This was more about how to prevent burnout as a lead. And I know we're going off on a tangent a little bit, but it's just that kind of setting aside of that particular time so that you're not just all consumed, whether you're on playa or off playa, because as we know, it can be just all consuming sometimes. So limiting it to those times seems like a really great strategy to prevent burnout. The other question that I have as a follow-up, and I think that was with Bobalicious, is that sounds like your camp is mainly in the same geographic location. In our camp, 2/3 of our camp is coming from outside of the Bay Area, and half of our camp is coming internationally. So how do you deal with, and especially when we know that people don't read things a lot. And I love the idea of, kind of personalizing it for our campers. But do any of you have any insights in how do we kind of capture people's passion when we can't have those face-to-face conversations, or that picnic or that potluck where we share food, and how we can effectively onboard people when we don't actually get to meet them maybe until we're on the playa?
In our case, actually, the Virgin Barbecue isn't for Astral Headwash. It's for the entire Denver area. So as far as Astral Headwash goes, we're probably 1/3 in Denver and then 2/3 not in Denver. So a lot of our communication is done just by emails. When we get together, we do tasks such as we make burritos that we take to the playa frozen. So everyone has at least, something that they can munch on for lunch. We do community dinners, but I digress. We, on our emails, probably every other email is a question or information that we need to gather from our campers to make sure they're engaged. They need to respond to those emails. And if they don't, then we follow up and say, hey, make sure you saw the email and that you're staying on track with us. I know email's often a one-way communication. Ideally, you want it to be two, but we follow up to make sure that our one-way communication is a two-way communication.
Yeah, we use a lot of surveys, and that really helps. So where people have to fill something out, and then we have the information from those people. AJ, it looks like you're trying to add something in.
Yeah, we have several group chats. I'm on like a group chat, like it all just kind of clicks. And I have found that to make it like a two-way street, sometimes as little as like a react emoji, like a thumbs up on something, at least lets me know that they've documented and read it. So like after an important message of like, hey, I just sent out an email to everyone at camp about paying your dues, right? And under it, I'll put, click the heart button when you've read that email. Because so much of so much of the communication I assumed people was reading or guessed that they were reading, but now I have like the actual list of names who people are like, yeah, I read that, as opposed to just sending that out into the void and hoping for the best.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Abigail?
I think there was a part of another part of your question about like capturing people's passions too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As a part of the communication. So not just like have they read it, but like what are you into if we only see each other on playa? Our camp has been really working on decentralizing our leadership. And so we have quite a few different leads for different departments. As welcome lead, I end up kind of like de facto, like new camper, virgin lead or whatever. But typically what I see in our camp is we're moving from what are we moving from? Signal to Discord. So I'll be interested to see how it works in Discord. But though when people like express things, we have weekly calls starting right around like now through Burn. And so when people express something like I'm really interested in this or whatever, usually the lead will capture them after and be like, hey, that's kind of like what I help with, what's your experience, and finds a way to like plug them in so that they get to be a part of the thing that's really important to them, so that people kind of end up in the roles that make them most excited.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the thing that's also important that I kind of hear a common thread, but it's just something to remind ourselves is there's not one way to do this. That we all have our different styles and if you know your camp, like we were talking earlier, the procrastinators versus the people who do things in advance, just as an example. One way isn't necessarily better for than another. It's just I think our personal how we work better personally. And I think for Camp Network too, when we do our campfire talks, we're really trying to remind people that, these are all suggestions and take them. If they work for you, they work for you. It's great. And, maybe it helps you expand to think about other ways that you could apply this information to your own camp. And then another thing that came up that I wanted to follow up with is kind of the camp ethos. So we talk about, the principles and one of you said, I don't want the principles to like just drive everything. I mean, super important as a foundation, but I know in our camp, we have our community principles that we have put into a one pager. We have it posted, we have it in a binder, we send it out because again, we're trying to create a culture, a community within our camp. And we want to be really clear with people about what kind of like what the expectations are to a certain degree. It's kind of like more like guidelines as opposed to expectations. So I just wanted to put that out there. How does your camp ethos guide your acculturation for your campers?
We actually did a big thought experiment on this last year of like, how do we decide what culture is as a large group of people? And like, how do we put that into words? So we have like some camp principles that were established at some point, and they're basic things like respect each other and certain behaviors and stuff. But then we were like, okay, well, how do we decide like a camp vision? Like, what are we doing here? Um, and what personally I found was that the people who were willing to come to those meetings were not necessarily the people who perhaps like practiced what I feel our camp culture is, in like on playa and in breath, right? So like I think a lot of our camp culture is actually decided by the 501(c)(3 that is Burners Without Borders. And so it attracts people to our camp. We end up with a lot of people who care a lot about doing good in the world and usually like to stay very busy. So a lot of our culture just ends up sort of decided by what we attract.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the rest we're still sort of, I think, trying to, and maybe Jamie can even try and chime into this, but like really trying to nail down as we decentralize leadership, what does decentralized like, yeah, because I imagine when your camp did that, there was to some degree a hierarchy of people, whether or not it was expressed or not, who decided those things? And so what does that look like in a more decentralized model? And I think that's something we've been kind of like struggling with how to define.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point. Mhm. AJ Bobalicious, want to address that, your camp ethos, how it affects your acculturation?
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of have a similar experience that I feel like a lot of people have a different connection might not be the right word, but like a different relationship with our camp or a different thing that they're doing there and trying to get out of it. Like we don't really have like I really envy the camps like Astral Headwash or like Moon Cheese. It's like here's the one thing that we do and we do it for the playa and we do it well. Like it's such a good system. I'm jealous. That's the right word. We have like 20 little kind of offerings throughout the week. And some are, like nightlife party based, and some of them are very like down tempo talkie based, and some are like community based. But it's really hard. I also sat down and tried to write a little one pager, and it ended up being like this vague list of platitudes. Like, again, we'll respect each other. Like, we will take responsibility for our actions at camp. And I didn't feel like it really captured the ethos of camp, but it really is hard to like. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to like mandate anything and say like this is who we are, right? Because I think we want to create space for all of the people to come and, my personal ethos is that like as a camp lead and a lead for build crew, like I just set the stage and I let everyone else kind of play on it and like co-create things there. So what I want people to come as is their authentic selves to be those players, right? Like it's hard when you're coming to Burning Man and you're like, I don't like, maybe we've all had this experience when you come to burn and you're like bringing something from home and you're like a little off and you're like not sure what you're supposed to be doing. Like I want people to feel light in themselves and get to participate in the way that feels really good for them. So like aside from some really basic like consent, respect, accountability things, right, to make sure that that's all flowing, I don't think I need to mandate much larger than that. I just want people to show up, make sure that we're respecting each other, and let people kind of be themselves once they get there.
Nice, nice.
I feel like for Astro Headwash, when we are talking with our virgins, we always make sure that we want them to understand that their first year at Burning Man happens to them. So no matter what they've heard, what they've read, everything that they know about, even if they've been to regionals, when they come to Burning Man, it's its unique environment. Burning Man's going to happen to you. So you're camping with Astro Headwash. You're giving a gift to the playa. We're first come, first serve. Everyone comes to us, which is lovely. But when you go out to a bar and the bar says, well, what are you going to give me for a beer? Then we educate them as like, well, you tell them that we didn't know we need to barter. We're Astro Headwash. We have people come to us and we just wash people's hair first come, first serve. We thought that that's how it worked. And we also educate them, you're given a great gift. Don't feel like you need to bring other gifts or trinkets or things that you're going to give away because this is your theme camp. This is your gift. You do enough giving that gift. You don't have to, give a gift to everyone, but more or less understanding that it's overwhelming and we want you to go out there and we want you to be overwhelmed and it's okay. And when you come back, or if you're overwhelmed at camp, come talk to us. But when you come back, realize that, your first year, it's a lot to absorb. And then your second year, you kind of get to feel if Burning Man's right for you, if Astro Headwash is right for you, what changes you want to make now that you have this experience under your belt. We never hold it against anyone who doesn't want to camp with us again or, decides that Burning Man isn't with them. We're like, that's cool. Burning Man is the best cult ever because you can leave whenever you want and you can throw yourself into it as hard and fast as you want to. But just getting out there and having the experiences, look for what you want. If we interview everyone before they come join Astro Headwash, and if we find someone that wants to go out there and 24/7 sex, drugs, and boom boom, we're like, hey, Astro Headwash probably isn't for you. There's other camps out there that you can really kind of figure out how to get the sex, drugs, and boom boom that you're looking for. We're more of a community and we share that experience. So we're not looking for campers to camp with us just because we need some camp fees. We're definitely trying to do a mesh between them and us. And if it's, one of our campmates' best buddies ever, we're like, yeah, come check it out. And if it's not right, it's not right. It's okay.
Yeah.
But give everyone an opportunity to realize that your first Burning Man, you're not going to be prepared for the experience. So let's see what happens to you.
Right. AJ.
Yeah, I just want to underscore, highlight, and retweet something that Bob Alicia said that I love. Tell all of your rookies that a service counts as a gift. Like somehow they got it in their mind that like they need to come with a million little trinkets to hand away. And like from a leave no trace and like an environmental sustainability and like single use thing, like none of it's good, right? Like I think the best gifts I've ever gotten on Playa were someone who's like, hey, I made you a Bloody Mary, as opposed to someone who was like, during the 12 hours in line, I furiously made necklaces that I'm giving away. You know what I mean? So make sure that they all know that. And like, I tell that to everyone. And I think most rookies are like blown away by it. They really thought that they had to come with like 500 blanks to give away. So highlight service as a great place for rookies to like give back. And that could be their idea of gifting.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And one of the questions that came in through our registrations is just the commodification that sometimes happens, and how do we deal with commodification? And I think that that's you've addressed that in a certain degree of let's not, like you say, bring stuff, especially if it's been like wrapped in small packages, and you're having more garbage. But thinking about, how can we serve? And like you say, some of my best experiences were, getting served something, not even in a camp, just randomly somewhere. So it's a really important thing, because we really also want to focus on this idea of decommodification, and also the idea of just not having people come into our camp because we need to fill something that we are having to do for the playa, that we've decided that our camp has to do all this, and therefore we need to have all these people, and therefore we're just going to bring in anybody. So yeah, really important points. Fantastic.
So I
Yes,
wanted to just
what
say
was
this really quick. Necklaces and gifts that we don't use. So we still keep them, but necklaces and little things that we just don't need.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anything else that you want to add before we move on to our next topic, just around this idea? Again, we're kind of really just talking about culture. Anything that you want to add? Nope. AJ?
There was a question early on about like best onboards and worst onboards. I would just be interested in what the other panelists had as far as good onboards and bad onboards. Right now, my experiences exist on a little island, and I don't know many other people who do my job. So I'd love to hear from you.
I actually, worst onboard I saw last year was to speak to your comment actually about the buddy system and how it can fail. And honestly quite irritated me. Was this sweet young man who came for his first burn along with a burner who had been there. I don't know. He gave me that like, I've been coming for 25 years or whatever kind of attitude, right? And he let his poor friend come with one of those like one-man backpacking tents that is all screen mesh on top and like very little preparation. And to me, like, I almost felt like this was like morally wrong to have to have done this to this person without like, because I was like, oh, did your friend talk to you about how this tent would function here? And he goes, well, no. And I was like, okay, well, let's find you. I think Deco's got some extra fabric. Let's at least find you a piece of fabric so that when you come back to your tent, you can pull out the pile of playa that you're going to come back to every time. And things like that. So I think the worst onboarding I saw was that, which really made me want to kind of address our system to it this year, because I think I had hoped, like I offered myself like, hey, if you're new and you have questions, reach out to me. Or, you know, like the person who invited you to camp should have some responsibility there too. But to me, I feel that needs to be a bit more like expressly outlined and the expectations of that made more clear, because the behavior of this camper who brought in this person without really doing any work to acculturate them was at first just defensive, and then over a build week it became dangerous because I also was the person who made sure that that person got to medical because they were too dehydrated. And so like these kinds of things have like chain reactions, and watching that I was like, ooh, okay, so maybe I was a little naive and starry-eyed in my like, I believe we're all going to do a really good job of making sure our friends don't have a terrible time. And this kid had a great time, but he had a really positive attitude. And had I been in his shoes, it would have been very different for me. And it would have been okay if he was upset. And so I would like to, as a camp, address that as more of a system this year. And I think that you guys have made some really good points of how we can do better in that.
Awesome. I just want to invite participants too, if you want to put anything in the chat, good things that have worked for you, or challenges that you've had, things that you've seen that have been great or maybe not so great too, share it in the chat. That's always really helpful. All right, let's move on. We have a poll, I believe. Puppy, who is our tech mod, we have a poll coming up because we want you to participate. There it is. So wake up if you're snoozing here. How did you learn about the 10 principles? I read and watched everything I could before I arrived. My friends told me what I needed to know, or I went blind. So please respond to the poll, and then I'll let you know what the responses are in a moment.
We needed a fourth response.
What was that?
I went before the principles.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you can put that, anyone who has that, put it in the chat. Then we'll count that. So here, 76% for I read and watched everything I could before I arrived. So that's the main things. 12% went blind, and 12% my friends told me what I needed to know. Ooh, careful with that one, because your friends may not tell you everything that you need to know. Awesome, thanks. So let's go into our next topic, which is about accountability, basically. And a lot of people say herding cats, how we herd cats in our camp, how we just pull everything together and help people be accountable and be responsible and be good participants in our camp. Again, in the Campfire talks, we have this great benefit for the Campfire, for the Camp Network team, that we get to hear, so much information. And a lot of a common theme from camp leads is, how do we get full participation from everyone in our camp? And I just want to share, I know we'll hear from the panelists, but one of the most I don't know, powerful pieces of information that I've heard through these years of being on the Camp Network team is, when your camp has a vision, when people love to be in the camp, it's not your camp, it's the camp, right? Because we're here as a community. They find that they don't have as much trouble having people participate. So we're kind of circling back to this vision. Does your camp have a vision statement? Is there something that makes people say, I wanna be here, I wanna participate because what we're doing is awesome. So that's just my little piece of information or input, but I want to hear from you about some of your tricks or strategies, things that you've done in order to encourage camp participation and accountability.
We start off at Astro Headwash. My wife and I interview everyone not face to face, or Zoom to Zoom, if you will, to make sure that they understand that our level of commitment for this community event is high, and that they don't have to, join us and wash hair. But we have other support roles that they need to be a part of, and we give them some options. We also have a sign up list that says, we know we need, 4 people running our camp every day. Pick one of those shifts sometime during the week. Know that you don't have to know everything, that there's people that you're working with that do. And when you sign up, get together with those people, talk about how you want to do things, but realize that you need to do one aspect of running the camp for that one shift to make sure that they understand that their participation in our camp is crucial to the success of our camp. And if they're not willing to participate and take that one shift, then that's another thing that we communicate with and say, this might not, if you don't want to do that role, this might not be the right camp for you. So, I mean, give them an out if they decide that, doing what we are asking our campmates to do is too much for them. So.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think so much of the accountability like changes depending on the scale of your camp too. So like we're a pretty big camp, so we have quite a few different systems, which means we have quite a few different like requirements from campers, right? Like everybody has to do so many shifts, and if you don't do your shifts, like it's pretty understood that like you will be talked to at some point or maybe not invited to come back to camp. But we have very little like overall for how many people we have in our camp, very little trouble with that. And I think that comes from like our camp being so many people who are doers and are used to having a lot of responsibility in the default world. So like the responsibility of like, oh, I have to go, cook for a shift, or I have to go I don't know, screen print or whatever, like that seems like very little responsibility compared to what I'm used to doing at home. And I think the other way, and it's with all things, right? Like when you create a community and you want people to be a part of it, you also need to create a sense of ownership. And so, what we talked about earlier about people uh like our leads chiming in and being like, oh, I heard you're interested in this. How would you feel about being a part of this? So on and so forth, kind of like really trying to pick up on people's passions and making sure that like to some degree they're highlighted without necessarily it being like, oh, you're new. What do you think we should change? Versus like, oh, you're new. You're new here. What do we have existing that we can get you evolved in that potentially then you could evolve over time? And I think that that's a really important part is that ownership, and then the ownership kind of like in and of itself creates a system of accountability because there is that desire to be there as well as this like I don't want to mess this up because this feels like something that is mine. And of course, like 111 people, there's always going to be like 1 to 5 campers that it's like not the best fit, but like I feel like our number was very, very low in that last year. And I don't actually, maybe it was like shared struggle that created that. I don't know. But I felt like our participation was really solid last year.
I think like what you're saying, seeing people as who they are, once again, back to that theme that's already come up a few times here of, everyone brings something different. There's not one way to do something, respecting each other, having fun, and maybe having boundaries as well, as a camp lead and not going beyond what you feel you can do and then like kind of lashing out because you're tired because you haven't set your boundaries as far as, what your expectations are, and just understanding that everyone is dealing with stuff out there on the playa, you know? Sometimes that playa is a kind of a rough place, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a perfect process. Like we have a safe word for when people are maybe not showing up as their best selves. Is like, hey, maybe you got to go drink some water. You're being kind of a jerk. We've got like a word for that, and that helps. As well as I think our decentralized system probably, I'm reading one of the things in the chat here, I think did contribute to more of our participation, because there's this like sort of like equal opportunity to really be a part of creating camp, depending on like how much and how well you show up.
Yeah, that's how it is in our camp. AJ, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things I'm hearing here. I really like the idea of meeting people where they're at. I also really like the idea of trying to make things fun. I tell all rookies that like going on an ice mission is really fun. Like hanging out in the ice line is one of my favorite parts of Burning Man. Um, so I kind of think of a lot of the things that our camp offers as like collaborative spaces. The thing that is like our main offering is we build it's like styled after a New York City bodega out front on the street. But it's really like a stage for us all to do some like performance bits, right? Like what are we selling today? What's on sale kind of thing. And when it's like flow and feels co-created as a fun thing rather than like you have to do a bodega shift, I think you'll always get more buy-in. And I also think that, you know, the people, when we were making people sign up or people signed up out of obligation, that was when, you know, all of a sudden they're, you know, I see them riding off on an art car 30 minutes before their shift's about to start. I'm like, oh, I'm probably not going to make it. You know what I mean? Like you want not necessarily 100% volunteers. You want good volunteers who are ready to go and write for that job. You know, maybe this is different with different camps. As a camp of 70, you know, if we're getting around 80 to 90% like participation and accountability, like that's really good for us, right? Like we feel like that's going to really flow and look good. And then you want to make those outliers, the people who aren't participating, like see what they're missing kind of, I guess, be like, oh, I want to be a part of that, right? Like you want the culture as a whole to be participation forward, accountability forward. And then the people who aren't are kind of like social outliers. That sounds like a mean term that I'm not sure I like, but like they don't feel like the rule, they feel like the exception, right?
Mhm.
One other thing that really was important for me to like why I wanted to be a camp leader, why I wanted to help. My very first year, someone was like, "Do you want to sign up at Center Camp Coffee Shop?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like that's something silly to do. And I was the person, I wasn't even making coffees. I was just like directing traffic out front, which was apparently a position. But some of the best burners that I've onboarded do something like a fire perimeter or a census or a post office or like an Arctica shift year one. And like I don't mandate that, I encourage it, but I do think that you kind of like when you're a rookie and you see behind the curtain a little bit, or you see how the sausage is made, and you're like, oh, this whole machine is just running on people like me doing one small little part, right? Like I think a lot of people who are coming to Burning Man have different festivals or different nightlife or different event experiences where like people are paid to make these things run, so they come through kind of like following that script, right? So if you can make them get outside that script and be like, yeah, why don't you pop over, you know, like post office is looking for volunteers to deliver mail. What a fun job to do on a random Tuesday. Like go do that at a different camp. And I find that that brings a new energy back to our camp, right? Like they are all of a sudden like, oh, I'm getting how this all kind of flows and works together now. Like, how do I get in that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. A lot of our campers volunteer throughout the week, and it's exactly what you're saying. You know, and when they come back, they're often so excited. And like you say, the post office is a great place for volunteering because then you get to go into camps and meet different people. And then sometimes there's spontaneous things that we get to do because a camp is in need. And like you're saying, your service. Here's our gift. Our gift is our service. Our gift is our participation. And I think once again, just providing the resources to our campers that, hey, this is out there. Don't forget to do this. Yeah, anything else that you'd want to mention on this topic about accountability, Bobblicious? Yeah.
I do, and this is a one of the things we had someone who went a little crazy on us one year, and one of the things that I now tell everyone, because we're from Denver, we're a little bit different from those from the Bay Area or Oregon or Nevada. We're a 16-hour drive out there, and then and you know, when we were young and stupid, we would do the drive straight through, get to Burning Man, find a place to camp, usually in the middle of the night, start setting up tents, doing all of this. And I was like, eat food. If there's one thing that people need to do out there, it's eat food. And we tell in our Virgin Barbecue, we're like, when you hit Fernley, I don't care if you're getting, you know, 2 burgers from the fast food place. We loved Scolari's. We went in, we got deli sandwiches, but we would get a couple of deli sandwiches. Everyone was required to eat a deli sandwich on the way to Burning Man and drink enough so when you hit the gate line, you're going to the bathroom. Because your excitement level is going to be at 11. You're going to forget to eat. You're going to forget to drink. You're going to want to set up something, and then you're going to want to go straight out. And if you have a, you know, a belly full of food and a bladder full of liquid, then when you go out, you're going to have a great time. You're going to come back. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to go to sleep. If you don't eat, you're going to do all those same things. But when you come back and you go to exhausted, now you're mentally just trashed and physically trashed, and it's not a good combination. So you see someone having a rough time, you know, food and water is a great way to make sure the virgins understand rough time usually means food and water is lacking.
Yeah, I agree. And we've actually started with, because we also have kind of an expanded co-leadership, and we invite, sometimes you have some people who might be older or just they don't feel like they can contribute in like the big physical ways. And so one of the opportunities that that they might have if they're feeling like, gosh, I really want to be like really active in camp, but you know, I don't want to pick up a hammer, is to be that person who checks in with everybody and maybe chops up a bunch of fruit and walks around, particularly during build and strike, or with a spray bottle, or with just a bucket, you know, a big thing of water to replenish their water. So that's also been something that I think is really helpful once again when we're talking about service, and we can do that within our camps and we can do it outside our camps as well. When, you know, when you're out and about, if you happen to have something extra in your backpack or can help somebody fix their bike or find their bike. I've done that a few times where people freak out and you're like, okay, I'll walk with you. It's okay, we'll find it. Yeah, so such an important thing. Thank you for bringing that up, that idea. So anything else? Because yeah, AJ, go ahead,
I
please.
think you know, Babalish is also touching on like this need for a lot of first timers to slow down a little bit. And I think like this is tied to accountability directly. Like I'm thinking of the person who camped at our camp. She had her tent right next to my trailer and never once put ice in her cooler. And she kept being like, all my cooler must be perfect. Like it still has ice in it. And I was like, I just keep putting ice in your cooler because I look over and it's so sad every time that I don't want you second every day to like slow down. And I think, you know, in my camp guide, in my rookie guide, in any communications I have, and then especially on playa, because I'm interfacing with a lot of these people, being like, it is okay, and even better than okay, like it is encouraged that you take just some moments to yourself that are like, you know, I need to tidy up my tent, right? I need to put some things away, put some other things away. I need to like put new water in my cooler, whatever those things are. And I think that takes a lot of practice, even for veteran burners, right? Like this is going to be my 11th year, and I am just like over the last couple of years, I'm like, okay, I'm getting better at this. But I think being an advocate for that for your rookies on playa then leads to more accountability in camp because, you know, like these people with spoiled food, dehydrated, running around, you know, like they're not really set up for success themselves, right? To then like clean up a mess or do a kitchen shift or do a, you know, a bodega shift. So really just advocating for like, you know, I think even at our camp, which has 70 people, you could kind of feel the communal lulls. Like some people are just getting back from their day trip. The night trip hasn't really gone out yet. We're kind of like, you know, eating, preparing food. That's a good time to like tap everyone and be like, you know what? Nothing is really happening right now. Why don't you just take a quick mish, fill that water bottle up, eat some food, clean things up, get some ice in your cooler, and those are the people that I think show up more for camp because their personal needs are already met.
Yeah, very good point. I think too that last year with the rain, I heard from a lot of people that it was kind of, despite some of the challenges that we all experienced, but we all, I mean, many of us just like sat in camp or sat in our tent and like read, which I never read ever anything. I'm a huge reader. But again, and it was like kind of sweet to have that time because it was raining to just chill, and not be on the go, on the go, on the go. So again, I think that's a really important point to bring up for us to slow down.
I really want to highlight actually something you had said a few minutes ago. Is it PETA? Am I pronouncing it?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, about how you show up around playa. Because I think that there's like how we can like teach people about playa, but I think that we can teach so much with our actions. And so slowing down outside, because in camp, I typically have a lot of rapport with the other campers, but taking the time when I'm out on playa and there's somebody who like clearly needs a friend for something totally achievable for me and maybe not something for like rangers or whatever, or Zendo, to be like, yeah, I'll walk with you and I will help you find your bike, because I think that moments like that create a sense of inclusivity, which in turn creates a sense of ownership, because that person that you helped find the bike for probably does that for other people now. And I think that like remembering that we can be these stewards, not just in our camp, but wherever we are on playa, goes a long way. Because like I know my other campers when I'm new are supposed to be nice to me, but a stranger in the city says a lot more about how much comfort and how much inclusion and community really is out there.
Yeah, and I would say, dare to say, the other 350 days of the year doing the same thing. I really work, although some people have a hard time if people are like too friendly sometimes because they're like, what do you want or something. But, really trying to, extend our stewardship beyond the playa to a 365-day a year attitude of being helpful. Yeah, yeah. So you know what? We haven't had any questions in the chat. I did address a few of the questions just in the incorporation of preparing for the campfire talk, but I just wanted to put it once again out to the participants. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put it in the chat right now.
We just have one minute
Yeah.
now.
Larry, go. Yeah.
Yep. So from Gary, a question is how many first-time burners are one and out and or bucket listers? My camp has them now and then, and they usually identify themselves. So I suspect that these folks do take more time and energy or coping skills. So do they just come one time and never come back, I guess, is maybe what the question is, or who repeated campers over the years?
Mhm.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you get. I feel like the bucket listers, I probably don't know until after. Like that's just like not there's not a way for me to collect that. But I will also say that some of the best campers that I've camped with, or some of the best friends I made out there, were one and dones. And like I'm not under any illusions. Like going to Burning Man is really, really, really hard, and especially, some folks go. It's like I quit this job and I haven't started this one yet, and this is my window, and it makes sense for me to go. And they've been great. I don't know that they've taken more energy or coping skills from me necessarily. But yeah, of course, just like everything else, I've had folks that are one and then never come back that are very challenging. I don't know that one and done is necessarily the metric that I would use to like plot, how good of burners they're going to be. I would be hesitant to like label bucket list burners as like, I don't know, a different genre.
Mhm.
And I don't, yeah, Gary, I don't know if I'm answering that question well, so feel free to expand if you have any further questions.
Abigail?
Oh no, it's more just I was just gonna say I would love to hear people's answers on this. My parents are coming next year because we're getting married out there, and um I'm like really nervous about it. Uh, because I find that in life they require more energy coping skills. But like hearing AJ's reflections, I'm realizing that my nervousness is actually probably misplaced because my experience with a lot of our bucket listers has been that like what I see almost is more participation. It's like I've got my one time to be here. I want to like drink this up and experience this and whatever. Um, and I agree with what AJ's saying on that. I don't think I would take like a specific like person and be like, oh, they're gonna be a terrible burner. Maybe I see some commonality here and there, but I also a lot of that I think is my own projections. Um,
And I would say the same thing. I mean, our camp's been going for a long time. We always have about 30% virgins. And, of those, maybe 25% return. And those who haven't returned, they had a great time. But like you said, it's kind of, especially if you're coming from far away, and especially, if you're on an academic calendar, like, I was on an academic calendar for my entire career, really, really hard to get that Burning Man week off. I had to wait till I was the big boss. Then I told him I was going to a family reunion because don't want to tell them too much. They may not respect me in the morning. But yeah, I love having the new people in our camp. It's just like such a highlight of our camp. And you know, some people have a hard time, but yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah, I'm not gonna base it.
I wonder
All
if
right. Yeah.
instead of thinking of them as like bucket listers, if we thought of them as like people who had one glorious opportunity where they were actually able to make it, and like how that changes how you think about it. Like it's when if they can make it, I'm happy that they're there, and I'm so excited like to share a little spot on playa with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I feel like that does kind of bring up a point I'd like to make, which is my most difficult onboarding for welcome stuff, I find is like the old been here, done that burner. Like and so my challenge to all of us, because I think, some of us are on the call maybe are those people or have moments of being those people, is to remember that there's always something we can learn and something we can improve upon. And maybe we are learning that from people who are there one time, or new or whatever. And I think that there's a lot to be learned, both directions there, and something that I try really hard to keep in mind, in my role.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. I so appreciate all of your participation. And Larry, any other questions that we have? No. Yeah. So would you like to make any final comments before we sign off? Any additional words of wisdom, something that we've left out around this topic that you'd like to share? No, no. Well, again, I just say there's not one way to do it. There's lots of different ways to do it, and we're just offering some bits and pieces, and take them as you will. And for participants, if you could please fill out our feedback form, which we just threw in the chat, we'd really appreciate it. And again, thanks to Abigail and to AJ and Bubblicious for taking the time not only to be here right now, but just to help plan this event for us. It takes the participation of everybody, including the participants. So we appreciate your participation. And I guess we'll just say we'll see you in the dust, and maybe we'll recognize each other, maybe we won't, but I think we'll be out there with open arms and open hearts, I hope. So thanks again. And yeah.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.